Imagine a man who spent his entire youth fighting a war that had ended decades ago. While the world was building new cities and starting fresh lives, this man was alone in a dense jungle in the Philippines, waiting for the enemy with his torn uniform and a rifle that never stopped shining. This is not a fictional story. This is a true account that reveals the absolute limits of human will. And perhaps that is why even today, when people hear this man's name, they are left speechless. His name was Hiroo Onoda. Born in 1,922 inches, a small town in Japan, Onoda grew up watching a Japan that dreamed of ruling the entire world. The Japan of that era was nothing like the Japan we know today. This was a Japan where children were taught from their very first day of school that living and dying for the emperor was the only purpose of life. In homes, in schools, in streets everywhere, the same message: surrender is weakness, death is honor. Onoda's childhood, too, passed under the shadow of this militarized environment. No games, no play, only strictness and discipline. One thought was carved into his mind: the order of his commander is the order of God. By 1944, World War II was at its peak, and Japan's condition had become desperate. In direct combat against America and its allies, Japan was losing badly. Then the Japanese High Command thought of a new strategy: guerrilla warfare, a force that would hide in jungles and hollow out the enemy from within. For this mission, selected soldiers were sent to Nakano Military School, and this was no ordinary school. Here they did not just teach combat. They taught how to survive alone in a jungle for months, how to destroy enemy supply lines, and how to remain hidden without any outside help for as long as it takes. Hiroo Onoda was among those handful of chosen men. When training was complete, his commander looked him straight in the eyes and said, "You must never surrender under any circumstances. You do not have permission to take your own life either. Whether it takes 3 years or 10, we will come back for you. Until then, do not let the enemy sleep in peace." These words sank into Onoda's mind like a carving on stone. For the mission, Onoda was sent to Lubang Island in the Philippines. It was a small island completely covered in dense jungle, and American and Allied supply lines passed right through it. Onoda's responsibility was clear: cut off enemy supplies, launch surprise attacks, and turn every corner of that jungle into hell for the enemy. He had 3 companions with him: Akatsu, Shimada, and Kozuka. Only a year had passed when, in August 1945, the world was shaken by a piece of news that had no parallel in all of history. America dropped atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Millions of lives were wiped out in moments. After this catastrophe, Japan officially surrendered. World War II was over. But on Lubang Island, there was no one to tell Onoda. The Allied forces knew that Japanese guerrillas were hiding in the jungle. They dropped millions of leaflets from the sky. Written on them were the words, "The war is over. Japan has surrendered. Come down from the mountains." When Onoda read one of these leaflets, only one thought crossed his mind: this is a trick by the enemy. He had been trained to believe that the enemy lies, that the enemy will try to mislead you. His conviction was firm: until my commander comes here himself, my war will continue. And from here began that test of human endurance that would last 29 years. No roof over his head, no rations, no companions, just wet ground, thick trees, and a mission. Raw bananas, coconuts, rice, occasionally stolen from local farms. That was their food. Sometimes they would hunt a cow and dry the meat to last for months. But this was not just survival. Onoda also launched several attacks on local people and police because to him, they all looked like allies of the enemy. Years passed. His companions disappeared one by one. In 1949, Akatsu surrendered. In 1954, Shimada was killed in a police encounter. And in 1972, when his last companion Kozuka was also gone, Onoda was left completely alone on that island. The Philippine government tried many times to reach him. Newspapers were dropped from the sky. Letters and photographs from his family were thrown into the jungle. His brother's voice was played over loudspeakers. But Onoda believed it was all a new trap. He was so skilled that large military squads and search missions failed to find him again and again. Some people had begun to think he was already dead. Others said his ghost still wandered the jungle. But where the entire world had failed, a 24-year-old young man stepped in and succeeded. Norio Suzuki, not a soldier, not an intelligence agent, just an adventure-loving young man with 3 goals in life: to see a panda, to find a yeti, and to locate Hiroo Onoda. He went alone into the jungles of Lubang and found him in just 4 days. On the 20th of February 1974, Onoda and Suzuki came face to face. Onoda initially raised his weapon, but Suzuki shouted in Japanese, "Onoda-san, the Emperor and the people of Japan are worried about you." Onoda heard him, but his condition remained the same. "I will only believe this when my commanding officer comes here himself and gives me the order." Suzuki returned to Japan, and the government tracked down the commander who had sent Onoda into the jungle 29 years ago, Major Taniguchi, who was now running a small bookshop to make ends meet. A special mission was planned, and Taniguchi was sent to Lubang Island. When Onoda saw his old commander, he immediately stood at attention and saluted. The commander pulled out a piece of paper and read aloud, "Officer Onoda, Japan has lost the war. Your mission ends today. Surrender your sword and your rifle." Onoda was 52 years old at that moment. The young man who had entered that jungle at 22 now stood at the edge of old age. He had sacrificed his youth, his friends, and the best years of his life to a loyalty that the world could only see as madness. He returned to Japan as a national hero, but the Japan he had left behind 29 years ago no longer existed anywhere. New technology, Western culture, all of it felt foreign to him. A year later, he left Japan and moved to Brazil. In 1996, he returned to the same island in the Philippines where he had spent his youth. He donated money to the local people and established a scholarship fund in memory of those whose loved ones had died at his hands. And on the 16th of January 2014, at the age of 91, Hiroo Onoda passed away in Tokyo due to heart failure. This is not just the story of a soldier. This is the story of a man who surrendered his entire existence to a single order. Onoda may have won that war, but he lost the war against time. And that was the greatest tragedy of his life. If you enjoyed this video, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments below.